The title is AI Voice Theft and the Hidden Dangers of Financial Scams Driven by AI. So I'll say a little bit about me first. I won't go on for too long, but obviously I'm a student. I'm currently studying at UWE, and I was a regional qualifier for the UK Cyber Leaders Challenge recently. It was amazing, it was great fun. And obviously I have a special interest in this topic, which is why I'm presenting this research today. But before I go into the darker side of it and the more unsavory side, I would like to talk about the benefits of AI in security systems. Obviously, you may be aware of it already, but it is very fast, a lot faster than manual operations. So it's very useful during a live cyber attack. It can cut down response time, and that's obviously what you want when you're dealing with a live threat. It can also identify potential threats a lot quicker. So if you're not in a live threat, but you've got things that are cropping up that maybe would go unnoticed, that could indicate that there's a bigger problem on the horizon, AI is good at identifying those. And just the weaker points within various systems. Obviously, we do have pen testers that do that, but AI is a useful tool even in those processes. It can also flag unusual user behavior, so identifying insider threats, and it can help to eliminate human error as well, because obviously we are all human. Sometimes things do happen and we do miss things. Now, to talk a little bit more about the vocal biometrics, that's the underpinning of voice cloning. So this is kind of where it started, and it is the initial point in the evolution that obviously led to vocal cloning at the end. So every single voice is as unique as a fingerprint. And there are these programs called automatic speech recognition programs that can essentially break down a person's voice and identify these unique aspects that you can use, like when you have your fingerprint. It's used a lot in business as well. So you'll have these programs and they will have a sample of your voice, and then they will listen to the current person speaking, say if it's on the end of the phone, and they'll be able to match these sections together to verify customer identity. So how this actually works is it breaks down your voice into these things called phonemes, which are known as the building blocks of speech. And then they'll use complex statistical probability programs to match them, and using these algorithms, they'll match them to the original voice on file. And this is called phoneme mapping. So Barclays Bank actually reported that using vocal biometric matching speeds customer authentication to as little as 20 seconds. And vocal biometrics have become a security staple for so many businesses within the UK and globally, such as HMRC and Lloyds Bank, NatWest. I believe the banks that I have researched, every single one uses vocal biometrics to confirm customer identity. And I don't know if any of you have actually done the My Voice is My Password for HMRC. It's critical infrastructure that relies upon vocal biometrics. So any threat to this is a threat to our infrastructure that underpins pretty much the entire country. So moving on a little bit into the cloning aspect and how AI comes into it. This is actually known as voice synthesis. So rather than matching something to another voice that you have on file, it actually takes these phonemes that have been broken down and it develops new sentences and new words, and it can create entire paragraphs from just a small sample of somebody's voice. It can actually replicate human pitch, inflection, tone, and it gives it such a realistic feel that actually it can be very hard to distinguish between the two. McAfee they've got a brilliant article actually where they have a comparison, and when I did the talk at the Southern Conference, I actually gave it as an example, and a lot of people got it wrong and they thought that the cloned voice was actually the more realistic voice. And I think it shows how easy it can be to be fooled by something like that, because I don't know about you, but I was always very confident that I'd be able to tell if it was somebody real speaking to me or not. But especially in recent times, AI has developed so quickly that it has got to the point where you genuinely cannot tell, and actually you'll go the other way and think that the real person speaking is AI. So I've got a couple of key facts that I'd like to go through. There was actually a survey that was conducted by McAfee. This was a little bit of a while ago, so the data probably has changed, but I do think that it is interesting and I think it's relevant. So 1 in 4 people in this survey had experienced AI voice cloning scams, or that they knew somebody who had. 70% said that they weren't confident that they could distinguish a real or a cloned voice. 77% of the people who had received a scam lost money from this. 36% said that they lost between £500 and £3,000, and 7% lost between £5,000 and £15,000. Some of the examples of the scam were that a loved one had been in a car accident, or they'd been robbed, lost a phone or a wallet, or that they needed help while traveling abroad. And that is in statistical order as well, so highest first. And then a couple of other facts as well. 1.9 billion people currently use voice biometrics for banking. And 24% of adults were victims of this scam, and 48% of adults were even unaware that the scam existed. And the scariest fact that is both my favourite and my least favourite is that it only takes 3 seconds of an audio clip in order for AI to take your voice, break it down into these building blocks, and then be able to clone it. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk about the 2 most common kinds of scams, and then I will give an example on one of them. So the first one is essentially where the threat actor will find audio on social media profiles and feed it into an AI voice cloning tool, which is available for free online. And then using open source intelligence tactics, the threat actor will identify the friends and the family of the initial target, and they will extort information that is freely available online, and they'll harvest contact details. So next, what they will do is they will find an intended victim within this circle of friends and family and use a free phone spoofing tool to make it look like the phone number they are calling from is the initial victim. And then they will use that to extort money. So that will be the kind of scams where someone calls you up and they say, I've just lost my phone, I've lost my wallet, I need you to send me some money, I'm with a friend, send it to their account, then I'll be able to get it, things like that. And then the second one is a little bit more high stakes. So in addition to obviously the dangers of AI voice cloning, it is important to note that it can bypass biometric security. So as I was mentioning before, there are a lot of banking groups that use biometric security. You use it for HMRC. So the second scam is essentially where they take this sample of your voice and they use it to bypass to get into your banking information. And either they can change your contact details so you no longer have access, and then they take the money that's in there, or they can even use that to just lay in wait and then take small amounts of money out from your account without you noticing. So they have constant access. I don't know about you, I would notice if that was happening in my account, but sometimes if it's a small enough amount, you might not. And the applications by 11 Labs and Speechify actually have already come out and identified AI as being misused to create these replicas. So it's something that is already happening. There was a very big business in Turkey that lost a lot of money because somebody pretended to be their director and transferred a lot of funds out of the company account. So unfortunately, this is happening a lot more commonly than we would like it to. So looking in a little bit more to the banking security, it's unfortunately, this can span across countries as well. So legally, it doesn't even just fall under our jurisdiction. Unfortunately, the world has to work together in order to protect against these kind of scams. Larger companies that have a lot more money, a lot higher stakes, they do have people working all around the world. And the larger the company, the bigger the threat, unfortunately. So I would like to go back to the first scam that I mentioned and bring up a case study. The names have been removed as they had been changed anyway, and for simplicity, just makes it a little bit clearer. So in March of 2024, a woman received a call during the night, seemingly from her mother-in-law. And during the call, the mother-in-law was crying and screaming until a man took over and, to quote, said, "You're not going to tell anybody. I've got a gun to your mum's head and I'm going to blow her brains out if you don't do exactly what I say." The threat actor then demanded £500 in return for letting the mother-in-law go, and once that had been paid, a further £250. So in this case, thankfully, the woman was with her husband at the time, and he was able to call somebody who actually had experience with hostage negotiation, who talked them through the call, and then after it had been concluded, they managed to get hold of the mother-in-law, who had been safely asleep. Obviously, not everybody in this position is going to have somebody who can talk through the situation with hostage experience. So that was very fortunate. But even in this case, they had no idea and they did lose £750. The combination of using social engineering in this is also important to note. They were called during the middle of the night. You're going to be groggy, tired, not thinking entirely clearly. And they use that to your advantage, which is why preventative measures and knowing what to do in this situation is incredibly important. Because actually, if you've never thought it through and then it happens, you could be in some real trouble. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about the laws and legislation regarding this. As AI and as these attacks are relatively new within the stratosphere, the law and legislation doesn't cover the victims, and they don't go after the perpetrators to the degree that it would need to be at this current time. Things have started to come in. So actually there was something called the Elvis Act that was implemented in Tennessee on the 1st of July of 2024. And that does actually recognise the voice as an intellectual property right. But unfortunately, that does only really cover musicians, and it's more about copyright rather than identity theft. Obviously, there are other laws that do come into play, and that's currently what police are using to try and prosecute with these crimes, but it's not specific enough, and therefore the punishment often doesn't fit the crime, and there is no support on the victim's side, and it can be a very, very hard thing to prove, especially when someone has literally taken your voice as part of your identity. And one thing I'd like to kind of circle on and finish on is that what you can do and how you can prevent it and what you can do during a live attack. So I'll start with preventative measures, really. One of my favourite things that I like to suggest to people is to create a safe word with loved ones and family and friends, because you never know who it's going to happen to. It should be something that is quick and something that is quite short, so that, say, God forbid, you are on the other end of a phone and somebody is threatening to harm you and you need help from a loved one, you can get it out really, really quickly. They know it's you. But also, so that if you're on the other end of the phone and somebody is claiming to be in a really bad position and they are scared and they need money from you because somebody is threatening them, if you say your safe word and they have no reaction or they don't confirm it, you know you can instantly hang up. So that's one of my favourite things. And it works when texting, it works when calling, anything. But with the safe word, never message it, never store it on your phone. It has to be purely verbal. You can write it down on a bit of paper if you'd like to, so you've got it. But no, don't keep it in any kind of digital capacity, because if something has been compromised on your phone and they find it, then it will be a lot harder to determine if the person you're speaking to is genuinely your loved one. Regarding social media, actually reviewing all of your privacy settings for online, making sure that your contact information isn't visible, your phone number isn't visible, and setting all of your accounts to private, so that the people who do follow you, they're people that you know that they're real people on the other end of the phone, rather than a couple of accounts that maybe you're not entirely sure if it's real people, or they don't really post a lot, so you think that it might be somebody kind of pretending to be another person. That is another tactic that is used. They'll threat actors will take a profile of a person and make a new account, seemingly like a new profile, and then they will follow people who do have private accounts to try and get in and find out this information. So just make sure that you can verify that the people who do follow you are people that you know. Making sure that any accounts you have with visual media, that they are the ones that are set to private. Think about if you have any videos on your own social media that have, you know, you singing happy birthday to somebody or you talking about your day, anything like that. It's found very commonly on TikTok, obviously, as I'm sure everybody knows. You'll post a video up and think nothing of it, but even a short amount of audio like that can be used to clone your voice. And obviously, finally, updating all of your passwords, making sure that your online security is as watertight as possible, using the guidance from NCSC about 3 random words, making sure that they are different for all accounts so that if one does get compromised, the rest of yours are fine. And where possible, turning on 2-factor authentication as well, so that if somebody does try to log into an account, you can verify that and confirm or deny. Now, obviously, all of this does change if it's in the event of a live scam. So the preventative measures are there, but they aren't watertight at this stage. And unfortunately, even if you do those things, you might still end up in a position where you are in the middle of a live scam. So obviously, if you're with another person, ask them to call the person who is claiming to be on the other end of the phone. Even if it looks like their number is what's calling your phone, they could be using a phone spoofing tool. So it is worth getting another person to call them up. And obviously, if they confirm that they are safe, then you can just hang up and then report the number to the local authorities, block them so they don't try and contact you again. But if you are alone, that can obviously be a lot more scary. Where possible, try and message them and text them, but they might not respond immediately. So a really useful tool to be able to use is the 999's emergency text response service. And they will be able to make contact with you and talk you through the entire situation so you won't be alone. So that is essentially my advice in dealing with these in a live capacity and also preventative. I do believe that in situations like this, preventative is the best thing that you can do, but being aware of what to do if those measures don't work is important as well. You have to stay calm and make sure that you don't panic. Be aware of if any social engineering tactics are being used, if you're being called when you're asleep in the middle of the night, things like that, just to help ground you while you deal with these threats. So to conclude, AI has many beneficial uses in cybersecurity, and it is important that we do recognise that. And it is good for tackling the constant advancement and evolution of these threats, because they do change very, very quickly. And while this is true, we do have to be aware that actually these tools can be turned and used with bad intentions. And it does pose some significant risks to biometric security. And both large companies with high value and smaller companies, individual people, are at risk to these kind of scams. And while a larger company may have a lot more money attached to it, actually, if you're just one person, signing away your savings could be your whole life. And we need to protect that as much as we need to protect larger companies. So with that in mind, making sure that you're using your preventative measures and your knowledge of the threat, if it ever does happen, that is the best way to protect against these kind of threats. Thank you very much.